Hello, good morning, and welcome to our final autumn series coffee talk. My name is Madison Miller, and I'm the marketing coordinator here at the Business Software Center. In today's video, we are going to discuss software compliance, avoiding Microsoft audits, and knowing your license usage. Now, we've gone over this several times before in our coffee talk series, but each time we bring it to you, we try to phrase it in different ways just to help gain further understanding on auditing processes and licensing compliance. So please stick around and join in on the discussion with any software compliance questions that you may have. Our questions and answers section is open on the right-hand side, so feel free to leave any questions or comments. Likewise, you can use the hashtag CoffeeTalkTBSC to leave us any feedback on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, or YouTube. And finally, we do have contact details at sales@businesssoftwarecenter.com, or you can feel free to email us at info@businesssoftwarecenter.com if you have any questions about today's session. So getting right into it, I'm sure if you've watched our coffee talks before, you are familiar with this little graphic here, but I think this graphic is very telling of software asset management. It really helps put into perspective, especially for visual learners, what exactly software asset management is. Now, of course, you can see that it embodies, of course, you can see that IT asset management embodies software asset management. So chances are, if you have an IT department, their responsibilities will also need to include software asset management, and then further down that involves software licensing management, and then finally software licensing compliance. Now, even though software licensing management and compliance may seem like the same thing, they are two separate entities. I would like to consider the license management as the optimization opportunities that you may have, essentially paying for the software you use, and then using the software that you're actually paying for. And then with software licensing compliance, that is more of the terms and conditions, the agreements, the auditing, just ensuring that you are remaining compliant with the current software that you are purchasing and using. So essentially, the goal of software asset management is to keep track of your assets. I mean, that would make a lot of sense, especially, for instance, if you were a clothing store, you take inventory on your clothing products. If you work for a restaurant, you take inventory on your food. So it works the same way here with software asset management. Keeping track of your assets essentially means taking inventory of what you have, what you're using, what's going on. Now, another goal of software asset management is obviously to simplify the processes that are put in place, just to make it easier for your IT department, but other associated departments that work with your IT. So that might be procurement, for instance. So a way to do that is certainly make these processes, we do the cloud age, and so right now it's easier than ever to find applications or software that can certainly amplify your business processes through automation, take away all the manual effort. Likewise, another goal of SAM is to reduce costs, and that means directly or indirectly reducing costs. So different examples of that would be not paying your employees overtime to have to stay late to perform auditing tasks. Another reduced cost would be avoiding auditing disasters entirely. So if you know your usage, you know your licensing, then you don't really have to worry about any auditing disasters, paying auditing fines. Now, another thing, software asset management, increase of return on investment. And so essentially what that would mean is you get more bang for your buck, you get more than what you're paying for. So an example of this would be simplifying a process, just like automation I was talking about earlier. Customers will tend to buy more if you have proper processes in place to make the buying process quick and efficient. So if you're an online store, having checkout would be an example of increasing your ROI. And then also with SAM, planning strategically, so that's support of IT and other departments. Software asset management really does extend to areas outside of just the tech department itself. And I feel like there needs to be a lot of synergy between the goals of the company and the goals of the IT department. And if these goals are able to align, then the ability to track and monitor software increases, the ability to have a higher ROI increases as well whenever each department works together. So yeah, I would say having a strong SAM team is vitally important, but then also having the communication between all the other departments and having common goals is definitely important as well. So I would say if you're a business who's not overly familiar with software asset management, certainly look into hiring somebody who can maybe be like a SAM director or just someone who can get in the IT department and really help you with your compliance and optimization opportunities. Now I'm going to go into exactly what software compliance is. So with software compliance, the question you can ask yourself is, what are you legally entitled to use? With compliance, you essentially can't over-license what you're currently using, because that definitely puts you into auditing disaster territory, which is what you want to avoid. But then again, if you are under licensing, which means you're paying for licenses and you're just simply not using them, obviously that becomes a large waste of money, especially if you are on one of those EA contracts, and typically those, I believe, are 3 years long. If you're not using what you're paying for, then obviously signing up for a long-term contract like that is probably not going to be beneficial for you in the long run. You'll be losing money. So I would say my advice there is, if you're coming to the end of an EA, maybe consider not doing that again. Rather do a CSP model, which means it's a cloud service provider model, meaning that you use all the applications via the cloud, and then you can have the pricing month to month. So that means you can flex your subscribers up or down each month, so you're never really over licensed or under licensed. Now, as I mentioned before about inventory, that's really vitally important even in the IT world. So software compliance does embody inventory. Now, of course, software compliance does cater to auditing defense. So you can definitely have all the data you need to ensure that nothing goes wrong with any audits that may come to pass. But also audits help reduce piracy and abuse. So audits are something that companies do just to help their business. So for example, Microsoft performs these audits just to ensure that there is no piracy or abuse going on with their software. Now, with software compliance, you are required to have the correct licenses for each device. So an example of this would be with Microsoft Office 365. Of course, you can only have up to 5 installs. So you can have them installed on any devices you want, whether that's your cell phone, Mac, PC, but you can only have up to 5 per license. So if you end up having more installs, say you have 10 installs, then you are no longer in compliance with your what you're legally entitled to use. Now, also with software compliance, you need to make sure that you run on the correct versions. This is to enhance security and reduces the bugs, obviously, with the updates, and then it also provides faster performance. What's really nice about the cloud is these applications update automatically, but if you're using a desktop app, oftentimes you have to perform these updates on your own. So I would say, once again, cloud is certainly the way to go at this point, just to ensure that you are running on the most recent and correct version. So if you haven't switched to the cloud yet, definitely consider looking into it. Here at TBSC, we do offer ways to get you switched to the cloud through cloud migration tools. So if you ever need any assistance or just advice, just please email me at info@businesssoftwarecenter.com, and I can certainly help you out with that. It's nothing to worry about. We have an automatic software for you We don't have to come into the office and download anything. We do this all virtually, so we can help you, especially during this time, to prepare you for audits, software compliance, and optimization of your Microsoft products. So this talk specifically focused on Microsoft Office 365, so I wanted to give a compliance example of Microsoft 365. So usually with Microsoft Office 365 audits, this is a formal and mandatory compliance review. So this means that in your contract, you might have an audit every year. It's probably not going to happen every year, but in your contract, if Microsoft wants to perform an audit, they have the ability to do it once a year. So that's in your terms and agreements that you've signed. So that's just something to be mentally prepared for. So say you've been in your business 10 years and this has never happened. You know, it's a possibility for in the future. Oftentimes with these compliance reviews, they give you a 30 days notice, and this is oftentimes written in a letter and then sent to your company. And then the compliance review is typically done through a third party. So it might be a little weird because it's not exactly Microsoft doing it, but they do outsource this to third parties that might be closer in the area for you. And I would like to, I'm not sure what I have on the next slide. Let me see right here. Okay, yeah. Let me just go ahead and go back to this slide here, and I'll continue my thought on the next slide. So yes, they do provide 30 days notice. And then there is an audit trigger. Sometimes, you know, if your business is just chugging along and there's not really a lot of changes in your business, you know, it's not going to really trigger an audit. But business growth or large business changes, especially with your employees, might trigger an audit. So an example of that would be you're a small business, you're growing pretty fast, and you're accumulating more work. So obviously you need to hire more staff. Well, then because of that, you need to purchase more licenses. So if Microsoft starts to see this fast growth, they might want to just perform an audit just to make sure that you understand what's going on and that you are purchasing all the licenses that you are using. So I want to just dive into the Microsoft audit process. So as I said, you will receive a formal notification letter that does provide 30-day leeway for you to make sure you have all your ducks in a row before the compliance process begins. Verifications are executed by independent accounting firms, so this would be the third parties that I was talking about. Now, the audit time does vary depending on your IT structure. Say you are a larger business, this audit might take a few days. If you're a smaller business, you know, maybe just a day or two. And then, of course, they do look at on-premise software as well as cloud software. And then finally, at the end of the audit process, we will receive a compliance or non-compliance notification. So essentially, you'll know whether your audit was successful or not. And to be successful, that essentially means you're not violating your terms and conditions or any agreements that you signed for these licenses. But there still is hope. So if you are not in non-compliance, I don't think it's anything you necessarily have to worry about too much, especially if you have a strong team behind you. There are different ways you can rectify the situation. There are actions for non-compliance that you can take. This is provided through the Microsoft website. They provide different ideas for you to tackle any non-compliance issues that you might have with your software. Some examples I have here are that you can remotely lock the non-compliant devices, you can retire the non-compliant device, or you can send push notifications to the end user. An example of sending a push notification would be, hey, we see that you have installed on 10 devices. Why exactly is that? Are some of them not in use? Could you please uninstall on certain devices just to ensure that you're compliant? So there are different actions that you can take, and Microsoft does give you the time to fix this issue before anything worse might happen. And then of course here at the Business Software Center, we have developed some tools to help with the auditing process. We do have the tracking and monitoring software that can really help with compliance, especially, and this is known as our Smarter SaaS product. We developed it with users in mind, so it's a really user-friendly piece of software, and you can look at all of your software usage within any time period. You can schedule it for within the past 90 days, within the past 180 days, really track and monitor your usage. And then we also have, nicely enough, a push notification as well that goes automatically out to end users, so you don't have to physically email each person. Our software can do it for you. Now, as I said, Microsoft does give you the opportunity to kind of redeem yourself and your business if you have any licensing violations. However, if you are not able to fix the situation, maybe it's a little bit out of control, out of hand, or your staff doesn't really know how to handle the situation, there are penalties for licensing violations. And so the first penalty is going to be the back payments. And so what that means is you essentially have to pay for the software that you've been using but haven't actually purchased in the past. So you just have to back pay all that software usage for within that time frame that they audit you and see. Unfortunately, though, oftentimes with back payments, there are additional fines that you have to pay, and this is included in your agreement that you do sign with the Microsoft 365. Some of these fines might be £100,000. Some of these fines can get really incredibly pricey, and this is all because, the audit didn't really go in your favor and you're not using the software appropriately. And this additional fine situation isn't not good at all. It could really put a lot in jeopardy. And so I'm just here to tell you, it doesn't have to get this bad. We certainly can help you and offer solutions for you just to ensure it never gets this bad. But finally, I think the worst case scenario here is the court hearings for stolen licenses. Now, of course, with court hearings, that means just additional fees that you have to pay, additional worry. And this all can be avoided through automating your business practices, making sure you have a right team to support you, etc. This is all very avoidable and fixable, certainly, so it doesn't have to get this bad. So here I have some advice for you. Certainly automate your business practices. I've been doing a lot of research on this current way of automating businesses. And what I find really interesting is not only does it relieve staff stress and improve staff happiness, but it also ensures that everything has the proper data back behind it. You can certainly rely on these automation tools to ensure that you're getting the correct data and, of course, getting the correct information to make business decisions moving forward. So an example would be our Smarter SaaS product. Of course, we give you automatic ways of saving. We calculate savings costs for you. We can show you your current usage, your non-usage. We provide free ways of letting you know how to improve your usage. Our advice is to get at least to 95%. And you'd be surprised to know how many businesses aren't at that level. Of course, another piece of advice is do your own internal audits. Maybe set a goal of doing it every 3 months, every 6 months, something. Have that security blanket in place. Do your own internal audits. And of course, use automatic tools for this. Get rid of the manual process. There's no point in sitting and counting and doing all of this manually. That leaves a lot of room for error. So you can get Smarter SaaS, for instance, our product. You can pay for it for a month and then just turn it off whenever you don't need it. So, that's the beauty of working with cloud software is you don't have to pay for continuous support if you don't need it. Now, of course, another piece of advice is have plans in place for remediation. So this means worst case scenario stuff. Maybe sit your SAM team down and say, hey guys, I just want to plan for the future. I want to have business plans in place for perhaps performing internal audits on a quarterly basis. I also want to have plans in place for remediation if our internal audits don't look good. Another piece of advice I have is know who to turn to. If you are confused at all about any of these licensing agreements, and I know sometimes it seems like a lot of legal jargon, please feel free to reach out to companies who understand this information, or reach out to the Microsoft itself. Reach out to somebody and ask questions just to ensure you're on the right track. There's no such thing as a stupid question, even though sometimes I don't feel like it. But definitely know who to turn to. Another piece of advice I would have to say is understand what may come next. So for instance, if you perform an internal audit, so an internal audit means an audit that you do within your business. It doesn't mean Microsoft's involved at all. This is just something to take inventory and stock of your current assets, software assets. So understand what may come next, especially with the auditing process. I think it's important to understand that worst case scenarios are these additional fees. Worst case scenarios are the court proceedings, and these are things that you don't want to happen. So by understanding that that may come if you don't have control over your software, this is completely avoidable stuff. Finally, my last piece of advice is to consider your licensing optimization. Now, I don't know if you remember, but the first slide I showed was a nice graphic about the IT department and their responsibilities, which embodies software asset management. Well, software asset management does embody the optimization and also compliance. And even though I said that they're different, they are simultaneously really similar. They do have a lot of parallels with them. So I would say, please consider licensing optimization whenever preparing for these audits or doing your own internal audits. So what is licensing optimization? So it's a part of licensing management. It ensures you're using your correct licenses, which is exactly what you do with licensing compliance as well. And then also you avoid unnecessary direct costs. So that means with licensing maintenance and support. And I would say with licensing optimization, you know your licensing application usage and your application installs. So as I mentioned earlier with Smarter SaaS, of course, we give you a nice visual of your application usage and installs, but there's other things out there that can help you track and monitor. I would say it's really essential and key to get this automated, especially because this is the cloud day and age, so everything can really truly be optimized just to ensure that you don't have any auditing disasters with Microsoft. I would say if you are considering optimization, please ask yourself these questions when doing so. Are we using the correct licenses? I think this is a really important question because you really need to know if you are paying for something that your company is actually using. So an example of this would be an E3 Microsoft license. Now with an E3 license, it provides more applications than an E1 license. But say you have, your sales team, and they don't need some of these apps that the E3 license provides. What you can do is then track and see their usage, understand, okay, hey, they're not using some of these applications. So what you can do is actually reduce down to an E1 license. And so what that means is you're paying less cost because you're paying for less applications, but you're actually increasing your usage because your sales team is using those particular applications that come with the E1. I see a lot of companies who are currently paying for Office 365 and they're not utilizing Teams as much. You'd be really surprised to see how many businesses don't utilize Teams to the fullest capacity. I think our most recent one we looked at was maybe only like 20% usage, and that's because their team are using other tools to communicate and make meetings, whether that's Zoom or Google or Skype or whatever. They're not using what Teams can facilitate for your business. And so what happens is you're not using what you're paying for, and essentially you're paying for something that isn't giving anything back in the long run. Now, another question to consider for optimization is the effort of optimizing these licenses reasonable? I would say effort is always reasonable, especially if you can make anything automatic. Of course, if it's manual and daunting and absolutely no one wants to do it and you wait until the end of the month to get it done, then the effort is not, it's not something that people want to put effort into, right? So if you can make it automatic and make it like carefree, worry-free for your employees, I think that's definitely the best way to go. So that's another great feature about our Smarter SaaS product. Another question to ask is what licenses are deployed versus what are used. So this goes back to different examples of maybe being in, let's see, under licensing or over licensing. Another question to consider is, can we reharvest the licenses? So that means perhaps say you're paying for a license, but the employee no longer works for you and you're still paying for this license. Well, what you can do is reharvest that license and reallocate to a new employee that might be starting up. So rather than paying for 2 licenses, you just reharvest the 1. Another question to consider for optimization is there a licensing surplus? I would say that some businesses tend to purchase licenses and then kind of forget about what licenses they even have. So having the ability to see your current surplus is valuable because you can see what licenses are kind of, you know, in the ether and you're not allocated anywhere. So typically with our Smarter SaaS product, if we see a surplus with your business, we'll come back and we'll ask you, hey, did you know you're currently paying for this business premium plan? Or hey, did you know you currently have this so-and-so license? Did you have plans for it? What's going on with it? And sometimes, you know, the department will be willing to reduce this. And what I mean by that is, with the cloud, what you can do is flex your subscriber down. So you no longer have to keep paying for the over licensing or the under licensing. Finally, I think a really important question here is the last question. Are we overspending on licenses? Never a good thing whenever you're overspending, especially whenever you have other business goals that you want to allocate money towards, right? Perhaps you are doing a new marketing campaign and you know you're tight for some money. You can certainly find some ways of saving, and one way is through figuring out if you're overspending on licenses. And so that's where, you know, the surplus or the reharvesting comes into place. If you know what you're paying for and you understand your usage, you can really figure out if you're overspending and then come up with a game plan on how to fix that. So I'm just going to go ahead and exit this presentation briefly to see what is going on with my chat box. Okay, I don't have any questions coming in for now, which is fine. I do want to reiterate right now that this is our last Coffee Talks for the autumn series, but I do want to let you know that we do have more Coffee Talks coming up in our winter series, and we're actually changing the dates and times just to be more inclusive with different time zones. So if you really find these Coffee Talks valuable, I'm just going to share here really quickly that our Coffee Talks are now switching to every Tuesday at 3 p.m. London time. And rather than them being these really long sessions, we're going to just go ahead and reduce it down to about 10 minutes, then leave a lot more time for questions and answers and discussion and networking. So if you're interested in that, please feel free to sign up. We do have Eventbrite. We have these events on LinkedIn, Facebook. You can even visit our website. There's many different ways to sign up for our Coffee Talks. So I feel like that would be really beneficial to anyone who's interested in IT and software to certainly join our Coffee Talks. But yes, if you do have any questions for me in the long run about licensing compliance, I know that was a lot of information to cover in 30 minutes. please feel free to email me at sales@businesssoftwarecenter.com. Likewise, we do have social media. You're more than welcome to find me on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter using the hashtag CoffeeTalkTBSC, and I can certainly get back to you that way. So I know we've covered this stuff in the past, and as I said, we like to reword what we talk about just to kind of drive the points home. So we really appreciate you taking the time to join us today for our final autumn coffee talk section. And please, if you are interested in signing up for our future coffee talks, check us out on Eventbrite, LinkedIn, or our website. Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll talk to you soon.